All right. Yeah, so today I'll definitely talk about, so for those who know kind of Finger Food Studios, we've definitely been in the AR space for some time. I think we're most famous for our project we collaborate with both Microsoft and PACCAR. This is an augmented reality Unreal design tool, which is kind of the reference project around the world for that. We also collaborated with Lowe's and Google for one of the first kind of indoor decoration apps, which you guys see a lot of. But today I want to talk about how we're kind of transforming big industry. So this is probably one of the biggest shovels in the world, and we're changing from, I say, retail to coal mining. So I want to start off my talk. Anybody skier here? Yeah, it's a few of you. I'm a big passionate skier up in BC. Probably had the best season we ever had. But I was also in my first avalanche, so I had to deploy my airbag. What are the first two words that kind of come to mind when you're in an avalanche? Oh shit, actually. So I think a lot of companies around the world are having this kind of oh shit moment because there's so much change. We talk about disruptive technologies. We've talked, you guys have to definitely know, I talk about Internet of Things. We talk about artificial intelligence. We talk about robotics now. Talk about holographic technology, and we talk about XR. I really think of holographic technology as really advanced user experiences to very complex systems, and obviously blockchain. We're doing a lot of work in this space. This is actually a great shot. You guys remember the movie There Will Be Blood? I feel like cryptocurrency and blockchain, people are drilling in the ground, oil's blowing up, but we don't even know what its use cases are. And it's that convergence of technologies around core business problems where we find are the biggest opportunities at large companies, and really have the ability to transform businesses and have a huge ROI. But it starts with that fundamental piece of actually finding a problem worthy of that investment. And a lot of companies we find that we end up working with, new technology is pretty funny, including XR. You probably have seen that. Everybody have kids in the office? In the room? Yeah, a few. You've probably seen this picture. You throw a ball in the field. It's called ball swarming, and kids basically just chase the ball around the field. That's most companies with new technology. And what you want to do is really work with companies is play a much more structured offense where that kind of core business challenge is the net. But who ends up being the defense? It's actually the organization that you're actually trying to do those massive changes with. And so that's a big kind of thing that we definitely learn. We've done some amazing projects, but sometimes they just sit in the shelf for a couple years until the organization can kind of catch up. And so that's kind of why we actually have strategic partners like KPMG, because we kind of realize as we can identify core business challenges, we put those creative firepower, do something beautiful. But again, if the whole organization doesn't come along for that journey, it's kind of a wasted opportunity. So definitely look at that when you got to think about these great ideas and great technology. How is my company? How do I come up with solutions that can actually scale across my entire organization and warrant that kind of investment in new tech? And so again, as I've been talking, I want to really hammer this home. Most people start on the outside. Hey, again, machine learning, what is that going to do for my business? XR, what does it do for my business? But you really got to start in the center. Start out and then see how technology can kind of change those workflows. And when I think of that criteria of those workflows, we try to look at kind of three basic things. Is this going to increase revenue, reduce costs? But a third one, which I think is really important, help manage risk. And I think we all know, I call it like the Amazon effect. Companies are just getting T-boned. And that's why that risk, and so this is a big thing, is including your finance team when you're actually developing these strategies of like, hey, this investment is not just about us getting these first two right. There's also a real problems like if we don't invest, what could happen in the future? And this is the other thing that, stay away from this. This is a McKinsey report. I'm not actually kidding. Sometimes you get too much analysis up front and you don't actually accomplish anything. So again, we try to guide our clients away, really focus on challenges, but when you find something worthy investment, to really go into that prototype phase. And so how do you kind of explain this to organizations? There's a concept, digital twin. Everybody's heard about this. I kind of find this is that kind of wrapper for all these kind of emerging technologies. A digital twin isn't just some 3D object that sits in space. It's not a gimmick. It's really something that can transform a business. And we kind of use this concept, digital transformation. And this is really important. Digital transformation fundamentally is turning your data into an organizational asset, where you actually have data governance. So you actually, if you don't have good data, it was alluded to in previous talks, well, then you can't really visualize anything, or you visualize the wrong thing and people make wrong decisions. So again, data as an organizational asset is incredibly important kind of to get across when you go on these kind of journeys. And this is actually some work. So one of our key partners is OSI Soft. So again, getting data, we've been working with one of our clients, they have 3 million tags out in the field pulling that data. This is where XR really starts to become valuable, because you have so much data out there. You got to think of what is that visual language that you need to create so you can actually drive productivity with your workforce. And one of the examples that I think is great, and this is work that we're actively doing, is actually working with Enbridge Pipelines. If you don't know Enbridge, they're the largest energy infrastructure company in North America. They have 20,000 miles of pipe. So what is Enbridge's biggest problem? Pipeline spills. In fact, a pipeline spill is $1 billion problem. And so, and they also, and Enbridge, with all those pipes, if there's a problem, they're absolutely willing to dig it out. In fact, they actually have almost $1 billion program just to maintain that infrastructure. But their biggest thing is well, where do you dig up? And speaking of large data sets, they basically run these, they call it PIG through the pipeline. And they do this basically internal sonar scan to kind of find basically dents and cracks and corrosion. But so much pipeline, how can they actually, what type of, actually be able to see that? Because they generate terabytes and terabytes of data. So actually we created a tool in XR with HoloLens, basically to create a visual language so they can quickly walk through pipes in basically 2 meter or maybe 6 feet at a time, radically improving the efficiency of actually going through and looking at critical areas. And this is something that when we think of machine learning, if you can actually visualize the data, you can create that criteria, you have data governance, then actually machine learning actually becomes a possibility. And a lot of this data, this is incredibly complex, but this also for some of the ISVs out there, drives huge cloud computing power to be able to do this. So without cloud, without kind of IoT, again, though that convergence, and XR, that really allowed us to kind of solve this business challenge in a meaningful way. And we're able to do that. This is a really important graph I call innovation, where we do these incremental changes and be able to find, when you go through these organizations and you find a problem with that investment, and you do that, kind of that convergence, you get this kind of exponential curve of value creation. And we get that value creation when you find something that, again, we have a $700 million program in an organization, and you start just taking small changes to that program, has huge effects for that organization. And again, at the same time, it's pretty fascinating. Again, we're retooling the workforce along. And the big thing is when people talked about this fear of change and process, but with Enbridge, they definitely saw by this investment, no one lost their job. They're just able to better deploy their resources out in the field. And one of the interesting things is that kind of came up, I don't know if you realize this, but of a professional engineer, 60% of their time is just finding the right information to make an assessment and sign off on that. So again, a tool like that is making people to actually do what they were trained to do in the first place. And now big industry, this is cool. We're actually working with a company called Tech Resources, big coal miner. I know coal's a thing now for Trump, but what do you guys think the biggest issue of a coal miner is? Anyone want to yell it out? It's actually the relationship between that shovel and their truck, from efficiencies. Loading truck in the most efficient manner is, those trucks moving, it's basically a conveyor belt. If there's a mistake or they overswing or that thing breaks down, it basically shuts that coal operation down, costing, tens of millions of dollars. And so we're actually working with them is actually building a custom, interface. This is actually just a prototype to basically allow that relationship, really focus on the relationship between the shovel and that truck. And this is a huge and exponential gain for someone like tech. So again, teasing out what is a big problem word in that type of investment. And the other thing, and just to hammer home that convergence, this is picking up. We have sensors on the shovel. We have GIS data of where that truck is. And just look at the scale of this. Again, pulling that together and using cloud computing to basically predictive to help that shovel operator in their hand just guide the shovel in. So again, I'm talking about different industries. I'm about to talk about Lululemon next. We've done some really interesting work with them. And again, I'm going to show a little video here. Just going to cue it up. It's interesting kind of teasing out what businesses can be in this kind of new era, that convergence of technologies. So Lululemon we think of as an apparel company that maybe our wives go to. But I'm about to, just a quick interview with Tom, who is their kind of head of innovation. And I want you to really listen to how he speaks about Lululemon. Play the video. There we go.
This feels like something that the world really needs right now. We may be presumed that we are a women's yoga apparel company, and that's absolutely not the company that I joined. Lululemon is a pioneer in helping people to achieve their best selves, which could in turn impact the healthcare industry, which could in turn impact all kinds of industries way beyond apparel. Whitespace is the innovation and R&D team at Lululemon, and our job is to lead in the world of what I call the science of feel.
It was really intriguing. And so I just want to set up what we actually work with them on. So using XR, so the big thing with Lululemon, they're actually looking at like, okay, they have this great customer base, but how are they able to actually create new digital services for them? So we actually developed a XR or virtual reality setup that was about getting people more in a mindful state. It's really about, so we actually developed using an IoT device that sits on your wrist that measures the variability of your heart rate, and we actually went through a whole simulation that allowed you to kind of get to that, basically, say, quickly get to a sense of relaxation as quickly as possible, and develop a baseline, and so you can basically train yourself. So again, creating a completely new service for the customers beyond apparel. So my point is that there's opportunities in the space that you've never imagined. You just have to tease out kind of what businesses can become in this kind of convergence of technology. Finally, I want to talk about, some of you guys may have heard this story before, but I think it's worthy of kind of addressing it again, is that what kind of got our company started in the kind of MR, XR, VR space is transforming automobile design. And so we actually, in our collaboration with Microsoft and Packard, we went through our first kind of meeting. We actually went through, toured their kind of advanced technology group, and we took this picture, and we're like, what are you doing? They're like, well, we're 3D printing a truck. We're like, why are you doing that? Well, that's how we've always done it. And actually, since that was a process that was invented in the 1920s by General Motors, to basically visualize, went from a draftsman table to basically by hand building out of a clay model a version of the automobile. That process didn't change until the introduction of actually AutoCAD in 1985. And then we went along 3 years ago and introduced augmented reality, radically changing that process. And why was it so important? Because it takes about 6 months to build a model from that data. And at the time, we changed that from 6 months to about 3 days. And in fact, today, as some of you may know, that process is instant, and they're actually developing and visualizing automobiles in real time, but at scale. And how do we do this? So one thing, execution is really important. So what does your teams look like to kind of tackle these problems? And I think it's really important. These are not engineering problems. It's creative problems. So look at that team. We had a creative director, associate creative director, storyboard artist. Most of the team is from the creative side. So as I talked about before, it's like these are not engineering problems. These are business problems with creativity. And the big thing is technology is so accessible. There's so much investment in that space. I don't battle Microsoft or Amazon or Epson, who was speaking. You look, how do we leverage that tech very quickly, and you find kind of business problems warranted for that kind of investment.